Alright, so I originally intended for this part of the video to be appended onto part 3 of first and second derivatives, but I figured that it would be better served as a standalone review video. So it kind of summarizes the main elements of what we've been talking about in the last 3 videos and puts it into a nice concise little form here that'll help you greatly as we move on into curve sketching. Alright, so this is kind of like a review of concavity and of first and second derivatives. Alright, so let's plow through this. So let's talk about what happens in each of these 4 cases. So let's say we have a function y equals f of x, and we have these 4 cases. F prime of x, now let's talk about this first. So f prime of x is greater than 0. What does this say about the function? Well, that says that it's increasing, right? It's increasing, right? That's what's happening there. Now let's look at the second derivative. The second derivative is also greater than 0. So what does that tell you about the function? Well, if you remember, that tells you that the function's rate of increase is getting bigger. So what we can say is that it's increasing at an increasing rate. So what would the graph of this look like? Well, let's go ahead and draw that. Let's draw a set of axes here. And this would look something like this, right? We have a function going up like that, right? So that's what this is. Now, do you remember what we call this in terms of concavity? Well, we call that, let's do this, right, yeah. We call that concave up, right? And again, this is purely because the second derivative is greater than 0. That's why we call this concave up, all right? So that's what's going on with this part. Now let's look down here. The first derivative is again greater than 0, so we say that this function is increasing. Now the second derivative is less than 0 this time. So what this tells us is that we're increasing, but our rate of increase is decreasing, if you know what I mean. So the function is still getting bigger and bigger, but it's not increasing as fast as it should be. So we're increasing at a decreasing rate. Okay, so let's draw a picture of what this might look like. This would look something like this, right? So our function is still increasing, but as you can see, it's slowly starting to flatten off over there. It's starting to flatten off, and you're approaching like an asymptote or something over there. So that's what this looks like. And now, do you remember what we call this in terms of concavity? Well, we call this concave down, right? And again, that is purely because the second derivative is less than 0, right? So that's what's going on here, okay? Now let's move up here now. That should be in blue. So the first derivative this time is less than 0. So this tells us that the function is decreasing, right? It's decreasing. But the first derivative, on the other hand, is positive. The second derivative, on the other hand, is positive. So therefore, we're decreasing, but our rate of decrease is increasing. So that doesn't really make sense if we say it that way, but the slope of the tangent line, if you remember, is getting more and more positive, is getting closer and closer to 0. So what's really happening here is that we're decreasing at an increasing rate. This one is probably the hardest one to understand intuitively, right? These two are probably the hardest to understand intuitively because they don't make sense with what we think in real life. Like decreasing at an increasing rate usually means it's decreasing even more. But in this case, what it actually means is that your rate of decrease is getting smaller. So like your rate of decrease is getting less and less negative. And let's draw a picture that might clear some things up. So this would look something like this. It would look something like this, right? So as you can see, you're decreasing, that the function is decreasing for sure, but the slope of the tangent line at this point, for example, is much less negative then the slope is much more negative than the slope of the tangent line at this point. So that slope of the tangent line is approaching 0, right? Analogous to what's happening here, the slope of the tangent line here is also approaching 0, like an asymptote there. So that's what's going on here, right? And again, this is actually going to be concave up. And that's again just because our second derivative is greater than 0, right? Last one. So let's talk about our first derivative. Again, it's negative, so we know that our function is decreasing, right? But our second derivative is also decreasing. So what's happening here is that our rate of decrease is becoming even more negative. So we're decreasing at a decreasing rate. Again, this doesn't make a lot of sense intuitively, just because a decreasing rate, that must mean that that the rate of decrease is going down. Is it getting close? Is it what's going on here? Well, and these two are very easy to mix up, to be honest. I'm not going to lie with you, because they don't make sense intuitively. So what this, I'm going to give you another way to think about this, is that we're decreasing instead of at a decreasing rate, at an increasingly negative rate. I hope you see what's happening. So if we're decreasing at a decreasing rate, so our slope of the tangent line is getting more and more negative. So what our rate of decrease is becoming more and more negative. So that's what I mean by this, and at an increasingly negative rate, right? But again, hopefully the picture will clear some things up for you. And this would look something like this, right? So as you can see, we start off decreasing at a very small rate, but then we're decreasing at a faster and faster rate, right? So our rate of decrease is getting more and more negative, right? So that's what I mean by when I say an increasingly negative rate. Oh, and this graph would also be concave down. All right, so yeah, that's about it. So again, this is mainly as a review video, right? So just make sure you're able to look back at all this and just understand where we got this from. So this is an accumulation of all the information we've studied in the last 3 videos, and this should be a quick way for you to refresh those concepts. If you found this video helpful, please do like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, and check out some other videos. See you next time!